Jake Morrison walked into the big white room where the Galactic Council met every day. The walls were so clean they seemed to glow under the bright lights. 40 different alien species sat around a giant circle table, all talking about humans, like they were some kind of problem that needed fixing. Jake kept his face calm, but his hands were tight under the table. The tall blue alien named Vexital was speaking again. His voice was loud and full of anger as he pointed one of his forearms at Jake. "The humans are too wild," he said. "They fight first and think later. They cannot control themselves like we do. This is why they should not have the same rights as the older races." Jake had heard this same speech 100 times before. For 30 years he had sat in this room listening to lie after lie about his people. The council always said humans were too young, too violent, too stupid to really matter in the galaxy. They gave Earth small jobs and tiny amounts of money while the big alien civilizations got all the important work. But Jake knew something the others did not know. His friend Lisa Hart worked in the human embassy just down the hall from this meeting room. Lisa was very good with computers, and she had been watching the council's private messages for months. What she found made Jake's blood run cold. 3 floors below where Jake sat, Lisa stared at her computer screen in the dark room. Her fingers moved fast over the keyboard as she read through files that were supposed to be secret. The council members thought their messages were safe, but Lisa had learned how to break their codes. What she saw made her stomach feel sick. Files talked about humans in a very different way than the public speeches. In private, the aliens called humans dangerously creative and unnaturally good at solving problems. One message from the council leader said humans had an alarming ability to unite enemies and create peace where none should exist. Lisa found reports that went back 50 years to when humans first met the aliens. The council had been lying. From the very beginning, they knew humans were special, but they were afraid of what that meant, so they decided to lie to everyone, including the humans themselves. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Peter Williams was working late in his lab on the research station called Meridian. Peter was one of the few humans allowed to work with alien scientists. Most days he felt lucky to have such an important job studying how different alien brains worked. Tonight, he felt confused and worried. Peter had been looking at brain scans from hundreds of different species. Every alien race was very good at one or two things, but not much else. The bird-like Xalans could do math faster than any computer. The rock people called granites could remember everything they ever saw or heard. The energy beings known as wisps could predict weather patterns years in advance. But human brains were different. Peter looked at scan after scan of human minds and saw something that should not be possible. Humans could think like Xalans when doing math, remember like granites when needed, and predict like wisps when looking at weather. It was like human brains could change shape to copy any other species. Peter pulled up the secret files he was not supposed to see. His hands shook as he read report after report about human brain studies. The council had known about human mental abilities for decades. They had done thousands of tests and every single one showed the same thing. Humans could learn to think like any alien species in the galaxy. The reports called it cross-species neural adaptation, which was a fancy way of saying humans could copy how any alien brain worked. No other species in the galaxy could do this. Most aliens could only think in the way their species had always thought, but humans could think like anyone. Peter looked at test results showing humans working with alien teammates. In every case, the human had learned to match their partner's thinking style within days. Human scientists working with Xalans started doing math like birds. Human builders working with granites began remembering details like living rocks. Human farmers working with wisps could predict weather like energy beings. But the files showed something even more amazing. When humans worked in mixed groups with many different alien species, they did not just copy one type of thinking. Instead, they combined all the different thinking styles into something completely new. The results were so good that the council had classified all the reports as top secret. Back in the council chamber, Jake listened to another alien complain about human colonies expanding too fast. The green insect-like creature called humans, reckless and unable to plan for the future. Jake almost laughed at the lies but kept quiet. If only they knew the truth about human planning abilities. Lisa sent Jake a private message on his wrist computer. The message was short, but it changed everything. "Found the proof," she wrote. "They know exactly how special we are. Meeting tonight after the council session ends." Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him with fake concern. They pretended to worry about human development and human safety, but Lisa's files showed they were really worried about human success. Every time humans tried something new, they succeeded beyond what anyone thought possible. Every time humans were given a small job, they found ways to make it bigger and better. The council had spent 50 years trying to keep humans small and quiet. They gave human colonies the worst planets and the hardest problems to solve. They thought this would slow humans down and prove humans were not ready for important work. Instead, humans turned bad planets into paradise worlds and solved problems that had stumped alien scientists for centuries. Dr. Peter Williams saved his research files to a hidden drive and began planning how to share what he had learned. The Phi evidence was clear, and it would change everything once other humans saw it. But first he needed to contact Jake Morrison and Lisa Hart. Together, they could expose the biggest lie in galactic history. The truth about humanity was about to come out, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Amanda Brooks stood on the bridge of her ship New Horizon, watching the stars move past them in the darkness of space. Her crew was returning from a routine survey mission near the edge of Council territory when something impossible happened. Their communication system picked up a signal that was not supposed to exist. The voice speaking through the static was weak and full of pain. "This is Archivist Veltar of the Council Historical Division," the alien voice said. "I am dying, and I cannot let the lies continue. Humans must know the truth about their history before it is too late." Amanda looked at her communication officer, Danny Rodriguez, who was trying to clean up the signal. Danny's face was serious as he worked to make the voice clearer. "Captain, this is coming from deep inside Council space. Whoever this Veltar is, he's taking a huge risk sending us anything." The dying alien's voice continued. "I have spent my life keeping records of galactic history, but the Council has forced me to hide the truth about humanity. I cannot die knowing that such important knowledge will be buried forever. I am sending you everything." Before Amanda could respond, her ship's computers began receiving massive amounts of data. File after file poured into their systems. Danny watched his screens fill up with information that should never have been shared with humans. "Captain, we're getting decades worth of classified historical records. This is bigger than anything we've ever seen." Amanda called for her senior officers to meet in the main conference room. As they gathered around the table, she began reading through the files that Veltar had sent them. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about human history. The official story said that humans had met the Council during a time of peace 50 years ago. Earth had been discovered by friendly alien explorers who welcomed humanity into galactic civilization. But Veltar's files told a completely different story. According to the real records, humans had arrived in Council space during the worst war in galactic history. The Zephyrian Empire and the Collective of Minds had been fighting for over 200 years. Entire star systems had been destroyed. Billions of beings had died. The Council had tried everything to stop the war, but nothing worked. Chief Engineer Ryan Campbell was reading through technical reports when he found something that made his hands shake. "Captain, look at this. The war ended just 6 months after humans made first contact. The files say human diplomats somehow got both sides to sign a peace treaty." Amanda pulled up more files and saw the details of what had really happened. When humans first learned about the war, they did not take sides like everyone expected. Instead, they studied both the Zephyrian Empire and the Collective of Minds to understand why they were fighting. What humans found surprised everyone. The two sides had been fighting so long they had forgotten what the war was really about. Generations of soldiers on both sides were dying for reasons that no longer made sense. The original dispute was about mining rights to asteroids that had been destroyed early in the war. Human negotiator Claire Watson had done something that seemed impossible. She convinced leaders from both sides to meet with her separately. Then she showed each group how the war was destroying the very things they claimed to be fighting for. The Zephyrians wanted security for their families, but the war made them less safe every day. The collective wanted resources for their people, but the war was using up all their resources. Ryan found more technical files that amazed him. Captain, according to these records, humans designed new technologies that helped end the war. They created communication systems that let the enemy sides talk to each other safely. They built medical stations to treat wounded soldiers from both armies. They even designed new types of ships that could carry refugees away from the fighting. But the most shocking discovery was what happened after the peace treaty was signed. The war had left both sides weak and broken. Their economies were destroyed. Their populations were sick and hungry. Their technology was falling apart from being used only for fighting. That was when humans did something that no other species had ever done before. Instead of trying to take advantage of the situation, humans helped both former enemies rebuild. Human engineers worked with Zephyrian workers to fix their damaged cities. Human doctors treated sick collective children alongside their own families. Human teachers helped both species learn new skills for peacetime jobs. On Earth, historian Dr. Helen Davis was doing her own research when she found evidence that connected to Amanda's discoveries. Helen had been studying reports of accidents and disasters that seemed to happen to human colonies and trade ships more often than they should. At first she thought humans were just unlucky or careless, but when Helen looked closer at the patterns, she saw something that made her angry. The accidents always happened when human colonies were becoming too successful. Human trade ships had problems right when they were about to sign big deals with alien companies. Human research stations lost power just when they were about to make important discoveries. Helen spent weeks checking the timing of every incident. She found that equipment made by council companies failed much more often when humans used it. Food shipments to human colonies were delayed whenever those colonies were growing fast. Communication systems went down during important human negotiations with alien governments. The pattern was clear once Helen knew what to look for. The council had been sabotaging human progress for decades. They made it look like natural problems and human mistakes, but it was really a careful plan to keep humanity from succeeding too much. Back on the New Horizon, Amanda and her crew were still reading through Veltar's files. They found records showing that human-designed technologies had spread throughout the galaxy over the past 50 years, but the Council had hidden where these innovations really came from. Medical equipment that had saved millions of alien lives was based on human designs. Transportation systems that connected distant worlds used human engineering concepts. Communication networks that allowed different species to talk to each other were built on human software. Danny Rodriguez looked up from his computer screen with wonder in his eyes. Captain, there are files here about things I never knew humans had invented. Faster space drives, better life support systems, new ways to grow food on dead planets. But none of the history books say humans created any of this. Amanda realized the full size of the lie the Council had been telling. Not only had they hidden human achievements, they had given credit to other species. Alien civilizations were celebrated for innovations that humans had actually created. Meanwhile, humans were told they were too primitive to make important contributions to galactic science. The truth was spreading through Amanda's crew as they read more files. Humans had not just helped end one war 50 years ago. They had quietly prevented dozens of smaller conflicts by finding solutions that worked for everyone involved. They had solved resource shortages that had threatened entire worlds. They had created new forms of art and entertainment that brought different species together. But the Council had systematically erased evidence of human involvement in all of these successes. They wanted the galaxy to believe that humans were lucky children who needed guidance from older and wiser species. The reality was that humans had been quietly saving galactic civilization for decades. Amanda looked out at the stars and felt everything change. Her people were not the junior members of galactic society that everyone believed them to be. They were the problem solvers and peacemakers who had been holding everything together while getting no credit for their work. Now she had proof of the lies, and it was time to share that proof with other humans. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity could really do. Kethvar had served on the Galactic Council for 20 years, and he believed everything they taught him about humans. The tall gray alien with large black eyes had spent his career thinking humans were violent and stupid. When the Council assigned him to investigate reports about strange human behavior, he expected to find proof that humans were causing problems as usual. His first stop was the military archives on his homeworld of Zelan. Kethvar wanted to review successful council operations, to show how much better alien planning was compared to human thinking. He pulled up files about the liberation of the Proxima colonies, which was considered one of the greatest military victories in Zelanian history. The Proxima system had been controlled by space pirates for over a decade. These criminals had taken over 3 planets and were using them as bases to attack trade ships. The Council had tried to remove the pirates many times but always failed. The pirates knew the system too well and had too many hiding places. But 15 years ago, Zelanian forces had finally succeeded where everyone else had failed. They had driven out all the pirates and freed thousands of prisoners. Kethvar had learned about this victory in school, and it made him proud of his species. What he found in the classified files shocked him completely. The successful attack on the pirates had not been planned by Zelanian military leaders at all. A human military advisor named Colonel Steve Bennett had designed the entire operation. The human had studied the failed attacks and found the pattern that everyone else had missed. Steve Bennett had realized that the Council kept trying to attack the pirates' strongest positions. This never worked because the pirates were ready for direct assault. Instead, the human suggested attacking their weakest point, which was their supply lines. The pirates needed food, fuel, and weapons from outside the system to survive. By cutting off these supplies, Steve Bennett had forced the pirates to come out of hiding to look for resources. Then the Zelanian forces could catch them in open space, where their hiding places could not protect them. The plan worked perfectly and the pirates surrendered within 3 months. But the official records gave all the credit to Zelanian General Morketh. There was no mention of the human advisor who had actually created the winning strategy. Kethvar felt sick as he realized his people had been lying about their greatest military success. He decided to visit the frontier world of Haven's Rest to investigate reports of human interference in local politics. The planet was home to refugees from 6 different species who had fled wars and disasters throughout the galaxy. The Council had sent supplies and aid workers, but the situation was still chaotic. When Kethvar arrived at Haven's Rest, he expected to find humans making the refugee crisis worse through their usual violent and thoughtless behavior. Instead, he found something that changed everything he believed about humanity. The human settlement was small compared to the alien refugee camps, but it seemed to be the center of all activity on the planet. Aliens from every species were coming and going from the human area throughout the day. Kethvar could not understand why natural enemies were working together so peacefully. He followed a group of Zephyrian refugees who were carrying medical supplies toward the human settlement. The Zephyrians were bird-like creatures who had been at war with insect-like hive-mind refugees just a few days earlier. Now they were working together like old friends. At the center of the human settlement, Kethvar found a woman named Marie Thompson organizing the daily distribution of food and medicine. She was talking to representatives from all 6 refugee species at the same time, somehow managing to communicate with each group in their own language and cultural style. Kethvar watched as Marie solved problem after problem that had been causing conflicts between the different refugee populations. The granite people needed a cold environment to stay healthy, but the energy beings required warm temperatures. Marie had designed a building system that created different climate zones, so both species could live comfortably in the same area. The hive-mind refugees were used to sharing everything equally among their people, while the Zephyrians believed in private ownership of property. This difference had caused many fights over resources. Marie created a system where supplies were distributed based on each species' cultural values, with shared goods for the hive minds and individual allocations for the Zephyrians. But what amazed Kethvar most was how Marie had identified the real source of conflict between the refugee groups. They were not fighting because they hated each other. They were fighting because there was not enough of the right kinds of resources for each species' specific needs. The Council had been sending generic supplies that worked for some species, but not others. Marie had contacted suppliers throughout the galaxy to get specialized equipment and food that each species actually needed. Once the refugees had what they required to stay healthy and comfortable, the conflicts stopped almost immediately. On the Council homeworld, Senior Archivist Morden was having similar doubts about the official story of human limitations. He had spent his career organizing historical records, and he was starting to notice patterns that disturbed him. Every major breakthrough in interspecies cooperation over the past 50 years seemed to involve humans in some way. Peace treaties that ended long wars always had human advisors present. Trade agreements between enemy species were often negotiated at human settlements. Scientific discoveries that solved galactic problems came from research teams that included human scientists. Morden pulled up classified files from dozens of diplomatic missions. In every case where natural enemies had learned to work together, there was evidence of human involvement. But the official reports always minimized or completely ignored the human contributions. He found records of a resource war between the crystal people and the liquid beings that had threatened to destroy both civilizations. The two species needed the same rare minerals but in different forms. Crystals wanted solid chunks while liquids needed dissolved particles. For centuries, they had fought over mining rights to planets that contained these minerals. The war ended when a human geologist named Danny Rodriguez discovered that the mining process could be modified to produce both solid and liquid forms of the minerals from the same source. This solution was so obvious that Morden wondered why no one had thought of it before. But when he checked the official records, the discovery was credited to a crystal scientist, with no mention of human involvement. Backlie. On Haven's Rest, Kethavar continued watching Marie Thompson work with the refugee populations. He saw her prevent 3 different conflicts just by paying attention to what people actually needed, instead of what they said they wanted. When the Zephyrian and Hivemind leaders came to Marie complaining about food distribution, she did not take sides or try to force a compromise. Instead, she asked each group to explain their eating schedules and dietary requirements. She quickly realized that Zephyrians needed small meals throughout the day, while Hiveminds preferred one large communal feast. The solution was simple once Marie understood the real problem. She set up 2 different food service systems so each species could eat in the way that felt natural to them. The conflict disappeared immediately, and both groups thanked her for understanding their needs. Kethavar began to realize that this ability to see the real problem behind apparent conflicts might be something special about human thinking. Most species, including his own, tended to focus on who was right and who was wrong in any dispute. But humans seemed to look for the underlying cause that made the conflict seem necessary. As he prepared to leave Haven's Rest, Kethavar felt confused about everything he had believed about humanity. The humans he had observed were not violent or stupid. They were incredibly good at understanding different species and finding solutions that worked for everyone. The evidence was piling up, and Kethavar could no longer ignore it. Either humans were much more capable than the Council claimed, or there was a deliberate effort to hide the truth about human abilities. Either way, he needed to investigate further. His worldview was changing, and he was beginning to suspect that the Council had been lying not just to the galaxy, but to themselves about what humans could really do. Jake Morrison had waited months for this moment. The human ambassador walked through the secret tunnels beneath the Council building alongside Kethavar, who had become an unlikely ally in their search for truth. The Zelanian diplomat had access to archives that no human had ever seen before. The deepest level of the Council building contained files that went back to the very beginning of galactic civilization. Kethavar led Jake through multiple security checkpoints using his high-level clearance codes. Both of them knew they were risking their careers and possibly their lives to access these records. The inner circle meets here once each month, Kethavar explained as they walked down a long hallway lined with storage devices. Only 7 beings in the entire galaxy know what is really kept in these archives. I am risking everything by bringing you here. Jake felt his heart beating fast as they approached the main archive chamber. For 50 years, humans had been told they were junior members of galactic society who needed guidance from older and wiser species. Now he was about to learn what the Council's leadership really thought about humanity. The first files they opened contained psychological profiles of human diplomats dating back to first contact. Jake read through evaluation after evaluation written by the galaxy's top experts on alien behavior. What he found made him angry and amazed at the same time. The reports described humans as having unprecedented cross-species empathy and dangerous levels of creative problem-solving ability. One study noted that human negotiators could adapt their communication style to match any alien species within hours of first contact. Another report warned that humans had an alarming tendency to find common ground between natural enemies. Jake found a file labeled The Human Problem that contained the Council's real assessment of humanity's capabilities. The document described humans as the first species in galactic history to demonstrate universal cognitive compatibility. This meant that human brains could learn to think like any other species in the galaxy. The file explained that most alien civilizations had evolved to be very good at specific types of thinking. Zilans were mathematical geniuses but poor at emotional reasoning. Granites had perfect memory but limited creativity. Energy beings could predict future events but struggled with immediate practical problems. Humans were different from every other species because they could do all of these things. When working with Zilans, humans became better at math. When partnered with granites, humans improved their memory abilities. When collaborating with energy beings, humans developed better prediction skills. But the most disturbing discovery was what happened when humans worked in mixed groups with multiple species. Instead of just copying one type of thinking, humans combined different cognitive approaches to create entirely new solutions. The results were so effective that the Council had classified all research on human group dynamics as a state secret. Kethvar pointed to another section of the archives. Your species has been studied more intensively than any other in galactic history, he said. The Council has spent enormous resources trying to understand how human minds work. Jake opened files containing brain scans, psychological tests, and behavioral studies involving thousands of human subjects. The research had been conducted secretly over decades using humans who thought they were participating in routine medical checkups or job applications. The studies showed that human brains had a unique structure that allowed them to process multiple types of alien thinking simultaneously. While other species were locked into their evolutionary cognitive patterns, humans could reshape their neural pathways to match any type of intelligence they encountered. Dr. Linda Parker was working late in her research lab when she made a discovery that connected to everything Jake and Kethavar were finding. Linda had been collaborating with her alien colleague Zarthul on a project to improve interspecies communication systems. What Linda found in their joint research files shocked her completely. Every major technological breakthrough attributed to alien species over the past 50 years had actually been based on human innovations. The medical scanners that had revolutionized healthcare throughout the galaxy used human-designed neural interface technology. The faster-than-light communication systems connecting distant worlds were built on human quantum networking concepts. Linda pulled up patent records and research papers going back decades. In every case, the original ideas had come from human scientists working in joint projects with aliens. But when the technologies were developed and marketed, all credit went to the non-human team members. The artificial intelligence systems running most Council infrastructure were based on human neural network designs that mimicked how human brains processed multiple types of information. The diplomatic protocols that had ended 3 major wars used human conflict resolution techniques, adapted for alien psychology. Even the medical advances that had extended lifespans across the galaxy were derived from human research into cellular regeneration. Linda realized that human ideas were being systematically stolen and rebranded as alien innovations. The Council was using human creativity and problem-solving ability to advance galactic civilization, while carefully hiding where these advances really came from. Meanwhile, Captain Nick Taylor was leading a deep space reconnaissance mission near the edge of Council territory when his ship detected unusual military activity. His sensors picked up large fleets of Council warships conducting exercises in previously empty space systems. Nick ordered his crew to monitor the military communications from a safe distance. What they intercepted made everyone on the bridge go silent with fear. The Council fleets were practicing something called Containment Protocol 7, which involved surrounding and isolating entire star systems. The military exercises were focused on human space. Nick watched as alien warships practiced cutting off all trade routes to Earth and the human colonies. They were rehearsing how to blockade human worlds and prevent any contact between humans and other species. Nick's communication officer intercepted a classified briefing being transmitted to the fleet commanders. The message talked about the human problem and outlined contingency plans for dealing with what they called uncontrolled human expansion. The briefing explained that if humans ever learned the truth about their capabilities, they might begin to demand equal treatment in galactic affairs. This could not be allowed because human success would challenge the existing power structure that kept the Council's elite species in control. The most chilling part of the military briefing was the final contingency plan. If humans could not be contained through economic pressure and political isolation, the Council was prepared to claim that humanity posed a biological threat to other species. This would justify military action against human worlds for the safety of galactic civilization. Back in the secret archives, Jake Morrison and Kethvar found the files that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The Inner Circle had made their decision about humanity within months of first contact 50 years ago. They recognized immediately that humans had abilities that could transform galactic civilization. But instead of celebrating this discovery, the Council's leaders were terrified by what human success might mean for their own power. The existing system gave certain species control over technology, trade, and politics based on their supposed superiority. If humans were allowed to demonstrate their true capabilities, this entire hierarchy would collapse. So the Inner Circle created a careful plan to suppress human development while stealing human innovations. They would keep humans believing they were primitive newcomers who needed alien guidance. At the same time, they would use human ideas and creativity to maintain their own technological advantage over other species. The plan had worked perfectly for 50 years. Humans remained grateful for their small role in galactic society while unknowingly providing the innovations that kept advanced civilizations running. The Council's elite species maintained their positions of power while taking credit for human achievements. But now the conspiracy was about to be exposed. Jake Morrison had all the evidence he needed to prove that the Council had been lying to the entire galaxy about human capabilities. The truth was finally coming out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Jake looked at Kethvar and saw the same determination in the alien's eyes. They both knew what had to be done next. The evidence they had gathered would shatter 50 years of lies and reveal humanity's true place in galactic civilization. The reckoning was coming, and the Council would finally have to face the consequences of their deception. Lisa Hart sat in the communications center of the human embassy with her fingers hovering over the transmission controls. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, working with Jake Morrison and their alien allies to compile all the evidence they had gathered. Now she was about to send the truth to every inhabited system in the galaxy. The data packet contained everything they had discovered about the Council's 50-year deception. Brain scan studies showing human cognitive abilities. Military records revealing human contributions to alien victories. Patent files proving human innovation had been stolen and rebranded. Secret communications discussing the human problem and plans for human containment. Lisa looked at Jake, who stood beside her with ambassador credentials that would give their transmission official weight. Behind them stood Kethvar and 3 other Council members who had joined their cause after seeing the evidence. Even some of the Council's own people could no longer support the lies. "Once we send this, there is no going back," Lisa said. "Every species in the galaxy will know what the Council has been hiding. Everything changes today." Jake nodded and placed his hand on the transmission button alongside Lisa's. "Humanity deserves to know the truth about what we are capable of," he said. "The galaxy deserves to know who has really been solving their problems all these years." They pressed the button together and watched as the data began broadcasting simultaneously to over 1,000 worlds. The signal would reach every major population center in Council space within hours. There was no way to stop it now. The first responses came from human colonies scattered throughout the galaxy. Colony administrators who had always wondered why their settlement succeeded beyond all expectations suddenly understood why. Human engineers who had designed revolutionary technologies only to see them credited to aliens finally had proof of the conspiracy. Captain Scott Harrison was commanding a routine patrol mission when he received the transmission. As he read through the evidence with his crew, Scott felt a mixture of anger and pride that he had never experienced before. His people were not the junior partners they had been told they were. They were the problem solvers who had been holding galactic civilization together. Scott contacted other human ship captains throughout the fleet and found that everyone was having the same reaction. 50 years of being told they were not good enough had suddenly been revealed as a massive lie. Human crews who had always felt grateful for small assignments now understood they deserved much more. Within 12 hours, Scott had organized a coalition of human vessels along with alien ships whose captains had joined their cause. They were not planning to attack anyone, but they wanted to make a clear statement. The old system of lies and deception was over. The fleet traveled to the Council homeworld not as conquerors but as beings demanding accountability. They came in peace, but they would no longer accept being treated as second-class citizens in a galaxy they had helped build. On worlds throughout the galaxy, other species were reading the transmitted evidence and realizing how much they owed to human innovation. The medical equipment that had saved their lives was based on human research. The communication systems that connected their civilizations used human networking concepts. The peace treaties that ended their wars had been negotiated using human diplomatic methods. Species after species began demanding explanations from their council representatives. How long had the council known about human capabilities? Why had they hidden human contributions to galactic advancement? What other lies had they been told about the humans living among them? The old council structure began to collapse under the weight of the revelations. Council members who had genuinely believed the lies about human limitations felt betrayed by their own leadership. Species that had been denied access to human innovations demanded immediate access to suppressed technologies. Dr. Patricia Wells was working at a research station when she received an emergency communication from the Council Science Division. They were asking her to help establish new research protocols that would openly acknowledge human contributions to galactic science. Patricia realized this was her chance to create something that had never existed before. She began organizing the first truly multi-species research initiative where human cognitive abilities would be openly utilized instead of hidden. Scientists from dozens of species would work together with humans, acting as bridges between different types of thinking. The possibilities were endless once the artificial barriers were removed. On the Council homeworld, the old Inner Circle leadership was in complete chaos. 50 years of careful planning had been destroyed in a single day. Species that had supported Council authority were now questioning everything they had been told. The power structure that had kept certain species in control was crumbling. But not everyone was opposed to the changes that were coming. Kethavar found himself working with human diplomat Claire Watson to draft a new galactic charter that would replace the old council system. Instead of hierarchy based on supposed species superiority, the new government would use human concepts of democratic representation and checks and balances. The new system would acknowledge that different species had different strengths and that true advancement came from combining those strengths rather than ranking them. Humans would no longer be forced to hide their problem-solving abilities. Other species would no longer be locked into narrow roles based on their evolutionary specializations. Claire Watson had experience from the early human diplomatic missions that had ended galactic conflicts. She knew how to find common ground between groups that seemed to have nothing in common. Working with reformed council members like Kethavar, she began creating a government structure that would serve all species fairly. The transition was not easy. Some of the old council elite tried to maintain control by claiming that rapid change would destabilize galactic civilization. They argued that the existing system, despite its flaws, had maintained peace and prosperity for centuries. But the evidence of human contributions made their arguments hollow. Peace had been maintained by human diplomatic interventions that had been hidden from public view. Prosperity had been built on human innovations that had been stolen and rebranded. The old system had worked only because humans had been unknowingly supporting it while receiving no credit. As the new government structure took shape, amazing things began happening throughout the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for generations started working together when human mediators helped them understand their real interests. Technologies that had been stalled for decades advanced rapidly when human creativity was openly applied to the problems. Jake Morrison stood in the chamber where the new Galactic Assembly was meeting for the first time. Instead of the rigid hierarchy of the old council, representatives from every species sat as equals around collaborative work tables. Humans were no longer isolated in a corner being lectured about their limitations. The transformation was visible everywhere Jake looked. Human children and alien younglings were learning together in integrated schools throughout the galaxy. Research teams were making breakthrough discoveries by combining human integration abilities with specialized alien knowledge. Former enemies were becoming partners when human peacekeepers helped them find mutually beneficial solutions. But the most important change was not in technology or politics. It was in how species throughout the galaxy understood themselves and each other. The revelation about human capabilities had forced everyone to question their assumptions about intelligence and superiority. Species that had thought they were naturally better than others learned that everyone had unique strengths that could contribute to galactic civilization. The rigid categories that had divided the galaxy for centuries were replaced by appreciation for diversity of thought and approach. Jake reflected on how far humanity had come from the days when they sat quietly in council meetings being told they were too primitive for important work. Now human abilities were openly celebrated and utilized. But more importantly, the galaxy as a whole had learned that cooperation produced better results than competition. The truth about humanity had been revealed, but the real victory was not just for humans. Every species in the galaxy was better off now that artificial barriers had been removed, and natural abilities could be freely shared. The Council had tried to hide the truth about humanity, but in the end, that truth had set everyone free. As Jake watched representatives from hundreds of species working together on problems that had seemed impossible just months before, he smiled at how much the galaxy had changed. The lies were over and the future was brighter than anyone had dared to imagine.